I'm not interested in documenting the real world. Photography, when it came about, went into this documentation where they were taking camera out into the real world, shooting street scenes, people living their lives. For me, I wanted to explore my inner psychology, or the inner psychology of my subjects, where it's about going inside an individual and showing their interior instead of their exterior self. It's a way of trying to capture the form of emotion. That I'm not interested in documenting real life, because I've also felt that that's been explored, and it's not really my thing. That I like this idea of this self-exploration. I feel that examining oneself is, for me, it's like a therapeutic release. That if I go into my interior and I shoot myself and I express these emotions, it's a way of bringing them out front and then able to evaluate them, cope with them, in essence trying to release them. My themes are usually somewhat dark, but you know, I deal with good and evil, because I believe as humans we are both good and evil. There's this dark side to us, as well as there's this very loving, caring side to us. But I will go into that dark side and try and express that, as well as, you know, I will go into the loving side and express that as well. But often I kind of want my work to confront the viewer. I want it to bring up emotions in them, to be somewhat confrontational in them, where they're able to say, well, you know, I have these same thoughts, I have these same feelings too. Like, these darker emotions are beautiful because they're universal in everyone. I just believe that man is flawed, and it's these flaws in ourselves that I want to explore. Humans are these dark, complex people that, you know, they have the ability to kill each other and be self-serving. When I was younger, I went to Kenya.
Get my head in there, like that.
To do a documentary, and Kenya had a lot of U.S. relief, but what happened is that a few people in the government took all that money for themselves and then just would allow people to die. And that always kind of influenced me, and that's from culture to culture. That's just not their culture, it's human culture, that we're willing to sacrifice others for our own personal greed, and that kind of dark place in humans always has intrigued me. It's these dark places that we want to suppress that I want to confront. One of the themes I also deal with when I was younger is the speech. I was always delayed in speech, and I went to years of speech therapy where I stuttered really bad and I was always really behind in speech. Well, when you're a kid and you have a stutter, other children are just ruthless. They'll just go right after you, and causes you to go into yourself because it makes you quiet. Throughout my life, I've always struggled with being able to verbally communicate well. And that kind of led me to a visual communication and a visual language, that you're able to express and talk visually to make up for the lack of verbal communication. So I deal a lot with speech. That had something to do with some of my anger or some of the emotions that I have felt in my life. So I create my work in camera. I don't use Photoshop. It's all done with one click of the shutter. I'm trying to master my techniques in photography. I often don't look through the camera when I photograph. I mean, maybe like 50% of the time I'll look through, but maybe 50% of the time I just release my eye from the lens, and I have a pretty good idea where it's gonna find my subject. There's an element of chance when I do my images, but I'm able to control how I want things to turn out. I know how light will perform, or I'm able to use my camera as like a paintbrush to get certain effects. You want to free yourself from like being controlled by the camera or whatever you're utilizing, and then just try and let things flow. But I make my strongest work when I release myself from the camera and I just allow things to happen. I feel that color expresses a certain emotion that other things can't quite express. That color really amplifies an emotion. Color causes psychological reactions. Warm colors can make you feel angry or hostile. Cool colors can make you feel sad. I really like how colors can influence an individual's mood. Often my images are surrounded by like this noise or confusion, and a lot of it's like this internal dialogue in my head. It's like these conversations I have in my head. Things become like muddled, where like my backgrounds are like filled with like chaos, which is like the chaos that's inside my head, and like, I'm staring out to the viewer to try and either look for answers or bring them into my world or relate to them. The eyes are very important in my work because there's something to this gaze. I'll illuminate the eyes so that they stand out compared to the rest of an individual. So the eyes are important because they're the gateway to the soul. If it's a full body shot, I often photograph myself ripped in half because I never felt complete. I usually do it where I'm this torso ripped in half that is looking for completion. Now, as I've gotten older, I think I've become more and more complete. I still don't ever feel whole because I feel that I haven't accomplished all my goals yet. I also will sometimes do images like of a king or royalty, but it's never like this king that's this proud thing. I imagine the king is very stressful, that it's this very taxing type job, that it's not necessarily this glorious job, but it's more of a burden of having all those responsibilities. I like this element of theatrics to my work. I like taking on these characters. There's a photographer, Cindy Sherman, that also deals with this in her work where she dresses up in costume. I assume that relates to my filmmaking background, this element of theatrics. When I was younger, I always wanted to be an actor, and then somewhere, I think my need to want to control stuff, I then became interested in behind the camera because I could control it more if I was behind the camera. Growing up, I had a very close friend that I'd known since I was about 4 or 5, and I would hang out and we played soccer together, and then eventually I moved away and he would come out and visit, and I'd come out and visit and spend time with their family. He had a really hard life. When he was in his early 20s, late teens, he dove off a lifeguard stand and ended up paralyzing himself. And then his mother ended up being his caretaker. And he used to write me letters, like how he sat there watching his mom go mad, and I never took it as like serious. We would make jokes that our moms were crazy. But his mom truly was going mad. To the point where, she went in and shot and killed him. And then shot herself. She was diagnosed with a terminal disease. But somewhere in her mental illness, she felt that she could take his life. I don't know, it's just like staring into this darkness. It was very devastating. As I'm getting older, it's the less my dreams are becoming attainable. That there's this loss of dreams or hope where you start to give up. But I mean, clearly I struggle with that and fight to pursue my dreams. But it seems as time goes on, these aspirations start to fall off. And it becomes this thing of survival. Now my dreams are gone, I'm just trying to survive. The reason I'm attracted to flowers is because they die and come back. And I'm really intrigued by this idea of that as well as there's beautiful things that wilt away to nothing and then they come back. And I feel that, as humans, that happens to our human spirit, that will wilt away to nothing and then come back. You have these moments in your life where you die and then you're reborn again, where you hit the bottom and then you build yourself back up, and then you hit the bottom and you build yourself back up, or there's relationships that die and then you're reborn with another relationship, as well as it's like death and reincarnation. I kind of do believe in reincarnation. I use these abstract images to have meaning. Like I often will put like circles in my work, which is basically like the circle of life. There's just like this circular movement in life that death and rebirth is really a prominent investigation that I deal with. When I shoot flowers, I often think of like insects and bees and have them buzzing around. They're chasing, flying through the flowers. And I often will represent that with light. It's like these paths of these bees flying through these flowers. I also like creating like these other world flowers. Like I almost think about it like if God was creating the earth. It's like the essence of a flower. It's not necessarily the representational image of the flower. Like I don't want to just be like, there's a picture of a flower. I want it to be like, there's this aura to the flower with the light that it's almost like it's being created by the heavens. So I try and put a lot of that into my work when I'm dealing with flowers and any of my other images. Prior to being interested in photo, I was doing printmaking, and the printmaking definitely influenced my work because I started moving from the natural form in my printmaking to this abstract form. As I continued with printmaking, I would start to incorporate images that looked like painted film. The two start to kind of like bounce off each other. My filmmaking went abstract and my art went abstract. Then I became more interested in these expressive colors compared to a representational form of an individual or object. But they always still had meaning to me, that these abstract images had meaning and emotion. My printmaking definitely influenced my photography. When I was younger, I went to the University of Colorado and I studied under experimental filmmakers Stan Brakhage and Phil Solomon. And I was very fortunate and extremely lucky to have them as mentors. Stan and Phil are two of the best experimental filmmakers, and they really influenced my work. With Stan, I would always go to his office hours, and Stan painted on film, and really that's where a lot of my work comes from, is this hand painting and manipulating the image. Stan was on the same wavelength that I kind of was. He dealt with abstract expressionism, which is basically non-representational form. And if you look at his hand-painted stuff, it's basically moving abstract paintings. And I was intrigued by that, and I would replicate and go home and do my own hand-painted films. And then from there, I brought that into my own photography. But Stan also talked about the people that did abstract expressionism all bordered on this line of like madness. That if you look at like Jackson Pollock and other abstract expressionism, they were all like this self-destructive people, and I was always intrigued by that because I felt I had some of those qualities, as well as Stan had those qualities too. Like Stan attempted to commit suicide. Stan had a self-destructive quality to himself as well. That and always seemed to intrigue me. With Phil taught me like this poetic beauty that he has that I don't think many other filmmakers have. Phil taught me about abstract imagery and how to use mistakes as an emotion or as an image. Phil knows how to capitalize on emotion, so Phil was really a big influence on me. I would say that my work is influenced by painting almost more than by photography. When I was in my teens, I would paint replicas of Van Gogh. I like the mark-making in impressionistic paintings. I like the bold brushstrokes, the sense of movement, this rough texture, this freedom and emotional element that's brought by these combinations. Beyond the impressionists and abstract painters is Francis Bacon. I was definitely influenced by his work. He isolates an individual and he deals with this psychology of an individual, this dark element, this scream, these grotesque images that reveal this hopelessness is what he deals with. So I was definitely attracted to his work. These elements and these people, plus so many that I don't have time to mention, really shaped my photography into what it's become. When I photograph other people too, I mean, I definitely love presenting them as beautiful. My favorite photographs of a lot of other people are when they look like in these dark forms. That to me is very intriguing, and often those are the least favorite because they want to be these beautiful beings. And I'm like, no, this is the image because it shows like this darker side, and I believe that's there's more truth to it. There's more truth to this darker image than necessarily this, flowery, beautiful image. But I still love those images. There is just something to just pure beauty. My work is darkness and light. I'm creating with light, and I paint with light. I mean, for me, my camera is almost like a paintbrush. And like going back to earlier thought, I use my camera as a paintbrush, and I create with light. I don't necessarily consider myself like a god, but like a creator of this world that I'm photographing, because a lot of it's like my internal mind. I'm capturing these abstract thoughts, and there's something to this creation. I do like bringing people into my world and saying, take a look at this. And I feel often they share the same emotions and same feelings that I'm trying to express. Also, when I photograph other people, I try and capture the subject's peace and calm. I try and invite the viewer into the sitter's soul. I also like photographing a moment when a person is content in life. One of the things is I do try and photograph the things I love and the people I love in my life when I can. What are you doing, May? I like my subjects to escape the realities of daily life, being swept away by desire, losing touch with their surroundings, having the light engulf their body, lifting them into this bliss. One of my favorite images that I made is called The Rose. And The Rose is of a woman and she's made of flowers. And I'm offering her a rose. And this is kind of how I felt, is that here's this person that's made of flowers and I'm trying to give them a flower. What I'm offering them is inconsequential. And with this rose, is like how I felt when I was relating to women, is that like often like I didn't really have much to offer them. They were already made of flowers. Here I am trying to give them a flower. That's my own self, insecurities. In that image too, there's this element of hope of, that maybe like she's kind of looking at it like maybe she might take it. One of the themes that I often will do in my work is I do like a lot of mythology and I guess religious representation. I mean, to me, it's all sort of mythology. I mean, I'm not a very religious person, but I do believe in treating people kind and good. But I don't necessarily feel that one religion is the right path. I just feel good is the right path. But I often will deal with this mythology in my work, where there's this sort of history and romanticism and questioning of religion too. I've always been attracted to this idea of sin. In my work, I'll show Eve offering an apple, that this temptation to sin is universal in everyone. I've also been influenced by the bad guys in history. I mean, like, I always thought that Judas was one of the most amazing characters in history because he was so complex, that he is the ultimate betrayal of good. So I've always was intrigued by like his story. Jealousy is an evil desire. I think that he probably was dealing with like jealousy of Jesus. You're willing to sell somebody else out to better your own life, and that's what's happened throughout history with humans. But I'll do images of angels and sin, and usually my angels are like sexy. I like this idea of like these good things sinning. I felt that like even good sins. Part of me also feels like God rewards bad people because so many people that I feel were good have been punished. And so many people that I feel are douchebags have been rewarded with like incredible, wealth and beautiful wives and all this stuff. And I'm like, it just doesn't make sense. And like I've met people that are like the most amazing people and then they die of cancer. So I have these beautiful angelic things that are sinful, that they're not always purely good. That God is not always good. I often shoot death too, like I'll shoot skulls. They're the ultimate equalizer because everybody's a skull. Man, woman, black, white, yellow, whatever, your ethnicity is, we're all skulls. Eventually everybody's gonna die. Nobody's gonna beat death. It's like this price that you pay for a living is that eventually you're gonna die, and believe me, death scares the crap out of me. I'm so afraid of death, and I don't like the fact that people die. I don't like the fact that, eventually everybody's gonna die. And so I like photographing it so that I have to confront that. Once it's put out in front of me, I can process it a little better. Instead of it just being this fear, it's on the paper and I can start to try and figure it out. I did this image of like this death figure walking through this forest. My mother had a brain aneurysm and she was near death.
Oh my God. Oh.
And they went and they did brain surgery and she was very close to death and thankfully she pulled through. I have this image that reminds me of that moment. And I call it I think I say death walks by, and what originally was death walked by my mother but didn't take her, because it deals with this idea of death coming for her. I flew down for the surgery thinking, there was a very good chance that my mom might die. And these image of skeletons, kind of help me deal with those type of emotions. When I was younger, I was always burdened with these nightmares. Sleep has always been elusive in my life, that I've never been one of these people that, gets a good night's sleep. I've always been either up thinking, it's like this internal dialogue in my head that keeps going. But when I was younger, I always had bad nightmares. And these skeleton images that I create reflect some of these nightmares. It's like these monsters that are created in my head. And they carry over in other areas of my life, even though they're not like skeletons, but maybe it's this other thing that I'm procrastinating, whatever, it becomes this monster. It just seemed like an important avenue for me to explore. So I deal with these images of skulls that are like these monsters in my head. Photos of mannequins because they are representations of past love. I'll put these mannequins in the frame with me, and they represent this longing for lost love. I think about failed relationships, and they're these weird forms that are these women that have either rejected me or the relationship didn't work out. So I explore past emotional feelings from being in love and breaking up, desire. So those are some of the themes. And often, there are these things of beauty that are unattainable. It's this pursuit of happiness. I don't know if it's ever attainable. I mean, that's life, is that you're happy, you're sad. You're never going to be happy just all the time. As well as it's conforming too. There's messages of conforming to this society, being in with these mannequins. I've always felt like an outsider compared to regular society. I can integrate fine, but there has always been a feeling of being somewhat different, than other people. I did this mannequin portrait of a Madonna and child. It deals with the religion theme, where I projected my face onto this mannequin boy, and then I have this mannequin. I have a halo done with light in the background, and it deals with the projection of my face on this mannequin staring out at the viewer, that like I'm pretending to be like the baby Jesus in some abstract form, but knowing that my death is coming. Like that Jesus knew that his death was coming, that like somehow I know my death is inevitable somewhere. I mean, hopefully it's far down the line, but it's just looking at one's own mortality. Marriage and a family definitely, you definitely become more secure. There was a period in my life where I went through heartbreaks with women. I would probably wear that on my sleeve and display it a little more than other people, I guess. Because then I would express it in my art and make these, like, I made movies about it. I did, it was a way for me to deal with it. Now that I'm married and I have a child, there's more completion to my soul. I always have them. They're there to support and help me get through any darker times. Whereas when when I was single, I was there on my own. And using my art was my way of dealing with those emotions. And now that I have a wife and a son, they're there to help keep me positive. Obviously, you go through these struggles, and then it's often what will reflect on your canvas. That this struggle through life, I don't know if it strengthens your work or makes your work more effective, but it definitely influences your work when you have to struggle. But, it'd be nice not having to struggle. It's terrible. I'm willing to go into darker areas of life. But I don't think my work is negative at all. I think that it's truthful. I'm looking at humans, and I feel humans are dark as well as light, but it's the darker that I feel that I need to confront. It's more therapeutic to me. I don't feel I need therapy for happiness, but I need the therapy for the dark stuff. So that's why my work usually deals with dark stuff, is because I'm going to that place to try and confront it and process it.